The Galactic Concord had watched humanity for exactly 200 years, and in that time, they had seen enough to make their decision. Ambassador Velkith stood in the crystalline halls of Axis Prime, his insectoid body towering over the assembled delegates from 4,000 spacefaring species. And he spoke with the certainty of a being who had conquered 80 star systems before humanity had even learned to split the atom. They expand too quickly, he said, his mandibles clicking with each word. They colonize without permission. They build warships when we offer them peace. And worst of all, they refuse to kneel before the authority that has maintained order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. The holographic display behind him showed Earth, a small blue marble spinning in the void, surrounded by 12 colony worlds that humanity had claimed in their mere century of interstellar travel. The delegates murmured among themselves, their various forms of communication filling the vast chamber with clicks and whistles and electromagnetic pulses that the translation system struggled to process. High Arbiter Thesan of the Dominion, a being of pure crystalline energy that had existed for 3 million years, pulsed with cold blue light as she addressed the assembly. We offered them membership, she said, her voice resonating through every mind in the chamber. We offered them protection, trade, technology beyond their primitive understanding. And what did they demand in return? Velkith's compound eyes glittered with something between amusement and disgust as he answered. They demanded equal voting power, as if a species barely a century into spaceflight deserves the same voice as civilizations that have existed since before their sun ignited. The absurdity of it rippled through the chamber like a wave, and beings who had not laughed in millennia found themselves making sounds of contempt on the far side of the chamber. A small delegation from the Merchant Collective raised a concern that would later haunt the survivors. We have traded with the humans, said Factor Yeneth, a being that resembled a floating mass of tentacles wrapped around a central brain. They are strange, yes, and stubborn, certainly, but they have never broken a contract, never cheated in a negotiation, never failed to deliver what they promised. Velkith dismissed this with a wave of his upper limbs. And that makes them more dangerous, not less. For a species that honors its word will also honor its threats. And they have made many threats. What threats? Asked Factor Yeneth. I have heard them speak of peace, of cooperation, of mutual benefit. Where are these threats you speak of? The ambassador from the Sithrani accessed the central archive and projected a recording into the minds of every delegate present. It showed a human, a female with dark hair and darker eyes, standing before a Concord delegation that had demanded humanity surrender its outer colonies. We do not wish for war, the human had said, her voice calm and measured. We have no desire to fight anyone. But understand this clearly. If you come for us, we will answer. And you will not like our answer. The recording ended, and Velkith spread his limbs wide. You see? They speak of answers as if they could possibly threaten the combined might of 4,000 species. High Arbiter Thesan pulsed with cold finality. The Sithrani representative speaks wisdom. For a rot must be cut out before it spreads. And humanity is a rot that will one day consume everything we have built. Factor Yeneth tried once more. Perhaps we should wait, study them further, understand what makes them. We have studied them for 2 centuries. Thesan interrupted, her light turning harsh and white. We know exactly what they are. A species of predators who somehow convince themselves they are prey. And when predators believe themselves cornered, they become unpredictable. The vote was called, and one by one, the delegations registered their decision. The Sithrani voted for war, citing humanity's refusal to accept their natural place in the galactic hierarchy. The Dominion voted for war, arguing that humanity's technology was advancing too rapidly to be contained. The Merchant Collective voted for war, swayed by promises of exclusive trading rights to whatever resources humanity's worlds contained. The Velkith voted for war. The Disrani voted for war. The crystalline hegemony voted for war. 4,000 species, representing 3 million worlds and quadrillions of sentient beings, cast their votes into the great tally. The result was unanimous. 4,000 to 0. Not a single species voted for peace. Not a single voice spoke in humanity's defense. Not a single delegate suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, they were making a terrible mistake. High Arbiter Thyssen addressed the assembly one final time, her crystalline form blazing with triumphant light. The extermination fleet will be assembled immediately. 12,000 warships from 200 contributing species, and within 6 months, the human problem will be solved forever. The chamber erupted in what passed for celebration among beings so ancient they had forgotten the meaning of joy. They congratulated themselves on their wisdom, their foresight, their decisive action against a threat that had not yet materialized but surely would have if left unchecked. They toasted to the glory of the Concord and the eternal peace that would follow humanity's annihilation. They did not notice the small probe that had been hidden in the chamber's ventilation system, a device so primitive that their sensors had dismissed it as debris, a device that had recorded everything and transmitted it to a receiver hidden in the asteroid belt of a system the Concord had never bothered to name. 12,000 warships began their journey toward Earth, their crews confident in their overwhelming superiority, their commanders already planning how they would divide the spoils of a species that had dared to dream of equality. The fleet traveled for 3 weeks through hyperspace, emerging near Jupiter with enough firepower to crack planets and enough troops to occupy 100 worlds. Admiral Zyrith of the Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and looked upon humanity's solar system with something approaching pity. They have 300 ships, his tactical officer reported. Primitive vessels with primitive weapons. They will not survive first contact. Zyrith nodded slowly, his crystalline body humming with quiet satisfaction. Hail them. Let them know that their end has come, and that the Concord offers them one final chance to surrender unconditionally. The message was sent, and the reply came within seconds. It was the same human female from the recording, her dark eyes showing no fear, no panic, no desperation. You were warned, she said simply. Remember that you were warned. The transmission ended, and Zyrith laughed. A sound like breaking glass. 300 ships against 12,000, he said to his officers. This will be over in hours. He was right about the timeline, but wrong about everything else. The extermination fleet moved toward Earth, and humanity moved to meet them. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, something ancient and patient began to wake. The galaxy had voted for war in 3 days. They would learn the cost of that vote. Admiral Zyrith watched the human fleet approach with the calm certainty of a being who had never known. Defeat 300 ships against 12,000 was not a battle. It was a formality, a brief unpleasantness before the real work of occupation could begin. All vessels, engage at will, he commanded. And the extermination fleet unleashed a storm of fire that turned the void into a blazing inferno of plasma and light. The human ships fought bravely. Zyrith would give them that much, weaving through the incoming fire with surprising agility and returning shots that actually managed to damage a few Concord vessels. But bravery could not overcome mathematics. And within 11 minutes, the last human warship exploded in a silent bloom of fire, and Zyrith allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as his tactical display showed nothing but the wreckage of humanity's pathetic defense fleet. Scan for survivors, he ordered. We may find their resistance leaders among the escape pods, and the High Arbiter wishes to make examples of them. His communications officer, a young Dominion crystal named Kirith, began the scan and then stopped. her form flickering with confusion. "Admiral, I am detecting anomalies throughout the fleet." Zirith turned toward her. "What kind of anomalies?" Before Karath could answer, the first scream came through the fleet-wide communication channel. It was not a sound that any Concord species could make. A raw shriek of terror that cut through the triumphant chatter like a blade through silk. Then came more screams. From dozens of ships, then hundreds. Voices crying out in languages that the translation systems rendered as pure. Distilled fear. "What is happening?" Zirith demanded, his crystalline form pulsing with alarm. "Report." Kyrith's voice trembled as she spoke. "Ships are going dark across the fleet." "Not destroyed, Admiral, but offline. Internal sensors are showing crew members collapsing at their stations. Entire decks falling silent." Zirith stared at his tactical display as ship after ship changed from active green to dead gray. 200 vessels in the first minute. 400 in the second. The pattern spreading through the fleet like a disease. "Show me internal footage from the nearest affected vessel," he commanded. The display flickered and revealed the interior of the Dominion cruiser Radiant Purpose. And what Zirith saw there would haunt him for the rest of his very short life. They moved through the corridors like shadows given form. Bipedal figures encased in black armor that seemed to drink the light, carrying weapons that made no sound but left devastation in their wake. The Radiant Purpose had a crew of 3,000. But these creatures, these nightmares made flesh, numbered perhaps 50, and they were winning. Zirith watched as one of them encountered a security team of 12 Dominion warriors. Beings of living crystal who had trained for centuries in the art of combat. The engagement lasted 4 seconds. Armored figure moved with a speed that should have been impossible. A blur of violence that left 12 shattered bodies in its wake before the security team could fire a single shot. "What are they?" Kirith whispered. Her light dimming with Tarajirith understood with horrible clarity. "Soldiers. They are human soldiers." The concept was almost too alien to grasp. For the Concord had abandoned ground warfare 10,000 years ago, deeming it inefficient and primitive. A relic of barbaric ages best forgotten. Why risk living beings in close combat when drones and automated systems could do the work without loss of valuable personnel? But humanity had never stopped training for war, had never abandoned the ancient art of violence, had never forgotten that sometimes the most effective weapon was not a plasma cannon or a gravity lance, but a being of flesh and blood who had dedicated their existence to the study of death. The boarding pods had been launched during the chaos of battle. Microscopic capsules that the Concorde's sensors had dismissed as debris. Each one carrying a handful of these monsters in human form. "How do we stop them?" Kirith asked, her voice rising with panic as more ships went dark. Zirith had no answer. Because the truth was terrible and simple. They could not be stopped. The Concorde ships were designed for space combat. Their corridors wide and open to accommodate the diverse body types of 1,000 species. Their internal defenses focused on repelling borders with automated turrets and force fields, but the humans had studied these ships, had learned their layouts, had trained for years in mock-ups built from stolen schematics, and they knew exactly how to disable every security system, exactly where to strike to cause maximum chaos. Exactly how to turn the Concorde's own technology against them within 6 hours. 2,000 Concorde ships had been captured, their crews dead or fleeing in escape pods. Their weapons systems now under human control. Zirith watched in horror as those captured vessels turned their guns on their former allies and opened fire. "All ships, retreat," he ordered, his voice cracking with desperation. "Fall back to the rally point." But the retreat was chaos, ships colliding with each other as panicked crews tried to escape. Captured vessels pursuing and destroying any target within range. The carefully coordinated extermination fleet, dissolving into a mob of terrified individuals. The eternal judgment shuddered as something attached to its hull, and Xyrith knew with cold certainty that his turn had come. He sealed himself in the command center, the most heavily armored section of the ship, and waited for the end. It came in the form of a single human, who cut through the reinforced doors with a tool that burned brighter than any star. A tall figure in scarred black armor, who stepped through the molten gap and stood before the admiral of the extermination fleet. Xyrith could not see the human's face through the opaque visor, but he could feel the weight of their gaze. "You voted for extinction," the human said, their voice flat and cold. "You came to murder 40 billion people who never harmed you." Xyrith tried to speak, to explain, to justify, but his voice would not come. "Your fleet is broken," the human continued. "Your ships are ours, your crews are dead or captured, and your invasion has failed. Then kill me," Xyrith managed, his light flickering with defiant resignation. "Finish what you came to do." The human tilted their heads slightly, and when they spoke again, their voice carried something that might have been sadness. "We did not come to kill. We came to defend. There is a difference, though I doubt you can understand it." The human pressed something on their wrist, and Xyrith felt a strange tingling sensation as a device attached itself to his crystalline form. "You will live," the human said. "You will return to Axis Prime, and you will deliver a message to your Concord." "What message?" Xyrith asked, his voice barely a whisper. The human leaned close, their visor inches from his face. "Tell them that Earth still stands. Tell them that their extermination fleet is gone. Tell them that this was mercy, and tell them that if they send another fleet, there will be no mercy left." The escape pod ejected from the eternal judgment, carrying Admiral Xyrith toward the distant lights of Axis Prime, and behind him, 2,000 captured warships formed up in perfect formation round the planet that had refused to die. The Battle of Sol was over, but the war had just begun, and somewhere in the halls of power, the rulers of the galaxy were about to learn that they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The High Council of the Galactic Concord assembled in emergency session as Admiral Xyrith's escape pod drifted into the docking bay of Axis Prime. They had watched the battle through long-range sensors, had seen their mighty fleet torn apart by creatures they had dismissed as primitive, had felt something they had not experienced in 10,000 years. Fear High Arbiter Thessen's crystalline form blazed with furious light as she addressed the assembly. "This changes nothing. The humans have captured some ships, killed some crews, but we have millions more. We have industrial capacity beyond their comprehension. We have the resources of 3 million worlds." Ambassador Velkith clicked his mandibles nervously. "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The humans have proven themselves more capable than what?" Thiessen interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "They ambushed a fleet that was not expecting resistance. They used barbaric tactics that no civilized species would employ. This does not make them our equals." The debate raged for hours, voices rising and falling as delegates argued over what should be done. But in the end, the silence will prevail. "As it always did, we will end this quickly," she declared. "No more fleets, no more ground forces, no more chances for these animals to surprise us." She gestured to the tactical display, which showed 3 massive structures orbiting a distant star. The kinetic accelerators, built to redirect asteroids for mining operations, but capable of so much more. The display shifted to show Earth, small and blue and fragile. 3 rounds, each one a mountain of iron traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, will impact the human homeworld simultaneously. Their planet will be reduced to molten slag. Their species will be extinct. And this embarrassment will be forgotten. Factor Yeneth of the Merchant Collective raised a tentacle in protest. This is genocide, pure and simple. We have never faced a threat like this. Thiessen cut him off. Extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures, and when we are finished, we will rewrite the histories to show that humanity destroyed themselves, that they were always a doomed species, that the Concorde had nothing to do with their end. The accelerators fired, and 3 artificial asteroids began their journey towards Sol. Unstoppable missiles that would cross the void in 18 hours and end humanity forever. Thiessen watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Now we wait, and soon, the human problem will be solved. But the humans had been preparing for this moment since before they ever met an alien species. 18 hours passed, and the High Council watched as the kinetic rounds approached Earth's solar system, watched as they passed Jupiter, watched as they entered the inner system, and then, 2 billion kilometers from Earth, all 3 rounds simply vanished. Thiessen's light flickered with confusion. What happened? Where are the projectiles? Her tactical officers scrambled to provide answers, but there were none to give. The rounds had been traveling through empty space. There were no ships, no weapons platforms, nothing that could have intercepted them. Scan the area, Thiessen commanded, her voice tight with growing alarm. The scan revealed what the Concorde scouts had missed for 200 years, a network of defense platforms hidden throughout the outer solar system, disguised as asteroids and comets and random debris, so primitive in their construction that the Concorde's advanced sensors had dismissed them as natural formations. They knew. Velkith whispered, his compound eyes wide with dawning horror. They knew we would come. They prepared for this. They have been preparing since. He never finished his sentence, because at that moment, something happened that had never occurred in the 10,000-year history of the Galactic. Concorde Axis Prime went dark. The planetary shields, capable of withstanding the focused output of a star, simply collapsed. The defense grid, comprising 50,000 of the most advanced warships ever constructed, went offline. The communications array, backbone of the Concorde's interstellar network, fell silent, and then it spoke. But not with any voice. The Concorde recognized every screen, every holographic display, every neural interface on Axis Prime and across 1,000 nearby systems, displayed the same message. You voted for extinction. 60 hours remain to rescind. This is not a negotiation. This is arithmetic. The time stop at the bottom of the message read, Day 1. Our 18th Thiessen's light had gone pale, almost white. How is this possible? Our systems are protected by encryption that would take 1,000,000 years to break. Her technical advisors had no answers, because what the humans had done should have been impossible. A single transmission lasting 3 milliseconds had somehow infected every computer system on the most heavily protected world in the galaxy. The virus, if it could even be called that, was not a program but a living equation, a self-replicating mathematical construct that spoke directly to machine code, that convinced systems to betray their masters as if persuaded by an old friend. Can we purge it? Thiessen demanded. We are trying, her chief technician replied, his voice shaking. But every time we isolate the infection, it adapts, it learns, it finds new pathways. It is as if we are fighting something that thinks. Factor Yeneth spoke into the stunned silence. 60 hours. They have given us 60 hours to withdraw our declaration of war. Perhaps we should. We should what? Thiessen's voice was a whip crack of fury. Surrender. Admit that 4,000 species cannot defeat one. Tell the galaxy that humanity has brought the mighty Concorde to its knees. Better humiliation than extinction, Yeneth replied quietly. Thiessen's form blazed with blinding light. The Concorde does not surrender. The Concorde does not negotiate with terrorists. The Concorde does not. The Concorde is paralyzed, Velkith interrupted, his voice hollow. Our defenses are offline. Our communications are compromised. Our fleets cannot coordinate. And we have less than 60 hours before something happens that we cannot prevent. The High Arbiter turned her fury on him. You speak as if the humans are gods. They are not. They are flesh and blood. They can be killed. They can be defeated. Can they? Velkith asked. We sent 12,000 ships to kill them. They captured 2,000 and destroyed the rest. We sent world-killing weapons to erase them. They swatted those weapons aside like insects. And now they have crippled Axis Prime itself with a single transmission. He paused, his compound eyes meeting Thessen's blazing form without flinching. Every action we take, they have anticipated. Every weapon we deploy, they have countered. They have been preparing for this war for longer than we have known they existed. And I am beginning to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, we are not the hunters in this scenario. The chamber fell silent, and in that silence, the weight of Velkith's words settled over the assembled delegates like a shroud. 59 hours remained on the countdown, and somewhere in the void between stars, humanity waited for the galaxy's answer. The Concord had 3 days to decide its fate, and the clock was already ticking. The vote came down to a simple question. Should the Galactic Concord rescind its declaration of war against humanity? For 30 hours, the delegates debated in the damaged halls of Axis Prime, their voices rising and falling as fear battled with pride, as survival instinct warred against 10,000 years of unquestioned dominance. High Arbiter, Thesan argued for continued war with a passion that bordered on madness, her crystalline form blazing so brightly that lesser delegates had to shield their sensory organs. If we surrender now, she proclaimed, we tell every species in the galaxy that the Concord can be defeated by sufficient brutality. Today, it is humanity. Tomorrow it will be another species, and another, until everything we have built crumbles to dust. Factor Yeneth countered with cold logic. If we continue this war, we may not survive to face those hypothetical future threats. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we cannot explain, weapons we cannot counter, strategies we cannot anticipate. Prudence demands that we accept their terms. The debate swung back and forth, but in the end, it came down to ego, to the simple inability of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia to admit that they had been wrong. 53 species voted to continue the war, led by the Sithrani and the Dominion, supported by the crystalline hegemony and the Voidwalkers, and 49 other civilizations who could not stomach the taste of surrender. 3,947 species voted for peace, their representatives speaking with quiet urgency about the wisdom of living to fight another day. Result was announced across the galaxy. The war would continue. The 53 would lead a new offensive, and humanity would be destroyed no matter the cost. The Sin basked in her victory, her light warm and triumphant. You see, the Concord's spirit is not broken. We will find the humans' weaknesses, we will exploit them, and we will. She never finished her sentence 41 minutes after the vote was broadcast. Every sensor in the galaxy detected something impossible. Homeworld of the Sithrani, a planet of 12 billion souls that had stood for 100,000 years, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no shockwave, no debris field, no radiation signature. Nothing that the laws of physics said should accompany the destruction of a world. One moment the planet was there. The next moment it was not, as if someone had reached into reality and simply erased it from existence. Ambassador Velkith, watching from his quarters on Axis Prime, felt his heart stop as the reports flooded in the Sithrani colonies were gone. All 80 of them vanished in the same instant as their homeworld. Then came the Dominion territories. 300 crystal worlds winking out of existence like candles in a hurricane. Then the crystalline hegemony. Then the Void Walkers. Then species after species until the tally reached its terrible conclusion. 53 species had voted for war. And 53 species had ceased to exist. Not just their military forces. Not just their governments, but every world. Every station, every ship, every single member of their kind. Trillions of lives. Erased in less than an hour, Velkith stumbled to the observation window and looked out at the stars. And for the first time in his long life, he felt truly small. How? He whispered to the empty room. How is this possible? The answer came in the form of a data packet that appeared on every surviving Concorde system. A gift from the humans that explained everything and nothing at the same time. Humanity had seeded the galaxy with doomsday weapons decades before they ever made first contact. Devices hidden in asteroid fields and buried in the cores of gas giants and drifting in the endless void. Between stars, they were not bombs. Not in any conventional sense. They were something far worse. Machines that could unmake matter itself, that could reach across light years and erase targets from existence as if they had never been. The data packet included the locations of some of these devices. Enough to prove that they were real, not enough to allow the Concorde to destroy them all. They knew, Velkith realized. His voice barely audible. They knew this day would come. They prepared for it before they ever shook hands with an alien ambassador. They smiled and traded and negotiated while hiding weapons that could destroy us all. The revelation should have been terrifying. And it was, but it was also something else. Clarifying humanity had never been the innocent victims they appeared to be. Had never been the naive newcomers stumbling into a galaxy of predators. They had been the most dangerous species in existence all along, hiding their true nature behind a mask of peaceful intentions, and the worst part, the part that made Velketh's blood run cold, was that they had not used these weapons until they were forced to. They had watched the Concorde assemble its extermination fleet, had let the kinetic rounds be fired at their homeworld, had given the galaxy every chance to choose peace. The humans had not wanted to become monsters, but they had been ready to become monsters if necessary. And now 53 species had learned the cost of making that transformation necessary. A new message appeared on every screen in the Concorde. The same calm female voice that had warned the extermination fleet before the Battle of Sol. We did not want this. Remember that. We asked only to be left alone. You chose otherwise. Now choose again. Peace. Or join the 53. The timestamp read, Day 3. Hour 4, High Arbiter Thiessen, whose light had dimmed to a pale flicker, spoke into the horrified silence. We must surrender. We have no choice. We must do what they say. Factor Yeneth finished, his tentacles hanging limp with exhaustion and grief. We must accept their terms, withdraw from their territory, and pray that they forgive us for what we tried to do. The vote was unanimous. 3,947 to 0. The war was over, ended not by battle, but by demonstration. By the simple proof that humanity could destroy any species that threatened them, and would do so without hesitation or remorse. They watched the surrender broadcast go out across the galaxy. Watched the Concorde's proud declaration of submission. Watched everything he had believed about the natural order of the universe crumble to dust. The humans had won. But as he studied the data they had provided, as he realized the full scope of what they had built, he understood that winning had never been the point. They had been preparing for extinction since before they reached the stars, building weapons and contingencies and fail-safes against the day when the universe would try to kill them, and when that day came, they had answered with a fury that made the Concorde's extermination fleet look like children playing with toys. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, and humanity had declared war on the concept of extinction itself. Blake closed his eyes and wondered how many other species were out there, hiding in the darkness, preparing for the day when the universe would come for them, and he wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, the Concorde had gotten off lightly because the humans had shown mercy, had given warnings, had offered chances to surrender that the Concorde did not deserve. The next species might not be so kind. The war ended not with a treaty, but with silence. No human ambassador came to Axis Prime to accept the Concorde's surrender. No delegation arrived to dictate terms. No occupation force descended upon the capitals of the galaxy. There was only a single transmission, received by every government in the Concorde, stating the new reality in words that left no room for interpretation. The war is over. You will not enter our space. You will not contact us without invitation. You will not speak of us except to warn others. These are not terms to be negotiated. They are facts to be accepted. Violate them, and join the 53, and then humanity fell silent, retreating behind the borders of their territory like a predator returning to its den after a hunt. For the first year, the Concorde waited in terror for the other shoe to drop, for the doomsday weapons to activate, for the human soldiers to appear on their worlds, for the end to come in some form they could not predict. But nothing happened. The humans rebuilt their defense fleet, mourned their dead, raised monuments to the 300 ships that had sacrificed themselves in the first battle, and otherwise behaved as if the rest of the galaxy did not exist. High Arbiter Thiessen, broken by her failure, retreated to a private dimension and was never seen again, her crystalline form dimming to nothing. In the years that followed, Factor Yeneth became the de facto leader of what remained of the Concorde, guiding the shattered alliance through its darkest days with a mixture of pragmatism and grief. Ambassador Velketh spent his final years writing a history of the war, a document that would later be suppressed by governments too ashamed to let their citizens know how close they had come to extinction. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something strange began to happen across the galaxy. It started among the Velketh, whose ancient religion held that to name a demon was to summon it. To speak a monster's name was to invite its attention. They stopped saying the word human in official documents, replacing it with euphemisms like the adversary and the distant ones. The practice spread to other species, driven not by religion but by fear, by the simple psychological need to distance themselves from what they had witnessed within a decade. The word human had disappeared from common usage, replaced by a dozen different names that all meant the same thing: the species that must not be named, the power that must not be acknowledged, the sleeping giant that must never be awakened. They became the unnamed in Concorde records, the quiet ones in children's stories, those who wait in the nightmares of species that had never known fear. Parents across the galaxy told their children the same stories, tales of a species that had been pushed too far, that had answered the galaxy's cruelty with a demonstration of power so absolute that even speaking their name felt dangerous. Do not wake what sleeps in the dark, mothers told their children. Do not corner what is not wished to fight. Do not mistake patience for weakness. Do not assume that because something seems harmless, it cannot destroy you. The children grew up with these warnings burned into their minds, and they passed them on to their own children. And the fear of humanity became something more than memory. It became mythology. 3 generations after the war, most citizens of the Concorde believed that the unnamed were not a real species at all, but a metaphor, a cautionary tale invented to teach humility to those who thought themselves invincible. Only the oldest survivors knew the truth, and they kept that truth to themselves, understanding that some knowledge was too dangerous to share in the Sol system. Humanity continued its quiet existence, building and growing and watching the stars with eyes that had seen too much. They did not forget what they had done, could not forget the 53 species they had erased from existence, could not escape the weight of trillions of lives ended by their hand. The monuments they built were not celebrations of victory, but acknowledgments of tragedy. Memorials that listed every human life lost in the defense of Earth and every alien life taken in response. Children asked their parents why the monuments existed, and their parents told them the truth, that once the galaxy had tried to kill them, and they had answered with such fury that no one would ever try again. But that is not something to be proud of, the parents would say. That is something to be mourned, for we became monsters to save ourselves. And monsters we must forever be remembered. The humans taught their children to be kind, to extend hands in friendship before fists in war, to remember that the power to destroy was not the same as the right to destroy. They taught them that the greatest victory was not the battle won but the battle avoided, that true strength lay not in the ability to end lives but in the wisdom to preserve them. And they taught them vigilance, because the galaxy was vast and filled with species that might one day look at humanity and see not a warning, but a challenge. The doomsday weapons remained in place. Silent sentinels scattered across 1,000,000 star systems, waiting for the day when they might be needed again. The defense fleet grew stronger each year, its ships crewed by soldiers who trained for wars they hoped would never come. And somewhere in the halls of power, the leaders of humanity met each year to ask the same question. Could they have done it differently? Could they have found another way? Could they have saved themselves without becoming the very thing they feared? The answer was always the same. They did not know, could not know, would never know. They had made the only choice they could make in the moment of crisis, had answered extinction with extinction, had proved to the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into the void. Whether that choice was right or wrong, whether it was justified or monstrous, was a question that would haunt them forever. But one thing was certain. They had survived, and in the end, survival was the only victory that mattered. The galaxy still turned, still teemed with life, still watched the borders of human space with a mixture of fear and awe and something that might almost have been respect. The unnamed remained in their territory, building their civilization, raising their children, living their lives in the shadow of what they had done. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars shone bright and the universe felt infinite and mysterious, a human would look up at the sky and wonder if somewhere out there, someone was telling stories about them, stories about the species that had refused to die, that had hidden claws beneath its gentle hands, that had smiled at the galaxy while preparing for its darkest day. Stories about the most terrifying monsters of all, the ones that never wanted to be monsters in the first place. The galaxy had declared war on humanity 3 days before it learned to fear speaking their name 1,000 years later. That fear remained, a testament to the power of a species that asked only to be left in peace and in the silence between stars. Where the doomsday weapons drifted and waited, humanity kept its vigil, hoping that peace would last forever, but ready, always ready, for the day it did not.